will say I'm ruthless. I'm not ruthless. I'm doing my job for Manchester United.
Were you afraid of him?
Yeah. Early on in my career, definitely fear.
When we do it something bad or we lost some games, he kick the chairs and he kick the boots, he kick everything, the waters, the drink.
He was horrible. Those were the words. Not a quiet pull aside in the corridor, not a diplomatic press conference answer, a verdict, short, sharp and final. Delivered the way only one man in the history of football could deliver it, Sir Alex Ferguson. The man who turned Manchester United into the most feared institution in English football. The man who looked a player in the eye and saw not just their ability, but their soul. And at 84 years old, he is still delivering those verdicts. He is still watching, still reflecting, still measuring every player, every career against the same unbreakable standard he built across 26 years at Old Trafford. Think about what that era actually produced. 13 Premier League titles, 2 UEFA Champions League crowns, 38 major trophies in total. A dynasty so dominant that clubs across Europe feared the name on the badge before a ball was kicked. Ferguson did not build that by accident. He built it by being ruthless, by demanding more, by identifying with precision the players who had what it takes and the players who did not. This video is about 7 players who did not. This is not gossip. This is a case file. 7 men who, for one reason or another, failed the Ferguson Standard. Some failed through mental weakness, some through physical fragility, some through a single act of disloyalty, and one, painfully, after giving the club some of his best years, still could not hold the flame high enough to satisfy the man in the dugout. By the way, if you are finding this breakdown worth your time, tap the hype feature and hype this video. It genuinely helps the channel and keeps content like this coming. Now, the standard itself. Ferguson was not interested in talent for its own sake. Talent was the starting point, not the destination. What he wanted was a mental engine, the capacity to push through pain, self-doubt, pressure, and failure without blinking. The hairdryer treatment, his legendary dressing room eruptions, was not cruelty. It was a test, a way of finding out whether a player could absorb the weight of the moment and come back stronger. The ones who could, thrived. The ones who could not, found themselves looking for a new club. And in late 2025, as Ferguson looks back from his 84th year, his message is unchanged. He has warned publicly that it could take 10 or 11 years for Manchester United to return to the very top of English football. That is not bitterness. That is the observation of someone who knows exactly what it costs to build a winning culture and what it looks like when that culture falls apart. He sees the gap in modern recruitment, the focus on stats and agents and market values rather than character, toughness, and hunger. These 7 case files show you exactly what he means. We begin with the heaviest one. Number 1. Wayne Rooney. Yes, the all-time leading scorer. The man who gave Manchester United some of the greatest individual performances in the club's modern history. A player Ferguson himself identified as one of the most gifted footballers he had ever laid eyes on. Rooney belongs on this list not because he was a flop, because the Ferguson Standard makes no exceptions, not even for legends. The early years were everything you could want. Rooney arrived as a raw, ferocious teenager, full of aggression and brilliance in equal measure. Ferguson loved that fire. He nurtured it. He built an attacking system around it. And for a long stretch of time, Rooney delivered at the very highest level. But Ferguson noticed the changes before most people did. As Rooney moved through his mid to late 20s, fitness questions grew louder inside the training ground. Ferguson was watching whether Rooney was doing what was needed to maintain elite condition, and what he saw gave him doubts. The hunger that once seemed limitless started to look like it had an endpoint. Then came the tactical friction. Rooney had a habit of playing on instinct rather than instruction. He would drift into positions Ferguson had not asked him to drift into. He would make decisions based on what felt right, rather than what the plan required. That earned him serious rollickings behind closed doors. For Ferguson, a player who could not subordinate his own instincts to the collective system was a systemic risk. Then came the transfer requests. In 2010 and again in 2013, Rooney pushed to leave United. For Ferguson, that was close to unforgivable. You do not ask to leave Manchester United when the club is still fighting for everything. You do not put your own preferences above the mission. Ferguson announced the 2013 transfer request publicly on television, which effectively ended whatever warmth remained between them. In Rooney's final season under Ferguson, the manager observed that he was struggling to perform at full intensity for 90 minutes. He was tiring in games fast, no player, no matter how decorated, gets a pass under the Ferguson Standard. Greatness demands consistency until the last moment. Rooney could not provide it. Number 2. Gabriel Heinze. This one is different. Heinze did not fail on the pitch. On the pitch, he was close to perfect. Hard tackling, relentless, passionate. A defender who played with the kind of raw commitment that Old Trafford adores. Ferguson respected what Heinze brought to training and to matches. Fans loved him. He looked like a Manchester United player in every sense. And then, in the summer of 2007, he threw it all away with one request. Heinze wanted to leave. That alone would have been manageable. Players leave clubs. It happens. But Heinze did not want to join just any club. He wanted to join Liverpool. Liverpool, the club that sits across the M62. One club that in Manchester United's cultural universe you simply do not go to. Not from Old Trafford. Not while Ferguson is in charge. Ferguson's response left no room for interpretation. He made it clear, without hesitation, Liverpool would not be getting Gabriel Heinze. He then entered a legal battle and fought through an arbitration process just to make sure the move could not happen. Heinze ultimately moved to Real Madrid instead, not Liverpool. That was the line. The so-called anti-Liverpool clause that Heinze complained about became a symbol of something much larger than a transfer dispute. It was a statement of values. Of what it means to represent Manchester United. Heinze later admitted publicly that the episode was one of the biggest regrets of his career. That tells you everything about the weight Ferguson placed on loyalty. He could forgive a poor performance. He could not forgive a player pointing himself toward Anfield. Number 3. Kleberson. When Kleberson arrived at Old Trafford in 2003, he arrived with extraordinary credentials. A reigning World Cup winner, a key figure in Brazil's midfield as they claimed football's biggest prize. The expectation was enormous. What followed was one of the clearest demonstrations of what Ferguson called the intensity gap. The Premier League in that era was a physical war. Midfields were contested with relentless aggression. You had to win tackles, cover ground, and compete from the first whistle to the last. There was no room for a player who needed time to settle into the rhythm of the battle. You either matched the intensity or you were exposed. Kleberson was exposed. Ferguson's verdict was blunt. He deemed Kleberson too soft for the English game. His performances were described as abysmal for United. That word, coming from Ferguson, is about as damning as language gets. The physical engine simply was not there, could not sustain the output level required in the high-pressure environments of the Premier League week in, week out. The contrast with his Brazil form made the failure all the more striking. At the World Cup, he had looked like a generational talent. At Old Trafford, he looked like he had arrived in the wrong league at the wrong time. Ferguson understood this precisely. He believed that technical quality is worthless if it cannot be expressed under physical duress. Kleberson had the quality, he did not have the toughness. And toughness, in Ferguson's hierarchy, sits above almost everything else. Number 4. David Bellion. This case is more straightforward, which almost makes it worse. Bellion was viewed by Ferguson as a weak signing. He had pace, genuine disruptive pace that could cause real problems for defenders on his best days. But pace was the beginning and the end of what Bellion offered. Ferguson's assessment was sharp and unsparing. He was a one-trick pony. When defences adjusted, when opponents worked out that speed was the only real weapon, Bellion had nothing in reserve. He lacked physical presence. He lacked the football intelligence required to function across multiple dimensions of play. At Manchester United, you cannot be a player who only helps in one specific situation. Ferguson demanded versatility of contribution, the ability to press, to receive under pressure, to support attacks and track back without instruction. Bellion could not provide that range. He never grew into the standard, never looked like he was going to, and Ferguson's patience for players who could not fulfill the basic structural duties of their role in the system was famously short. Number 5. Bebe. If Bellion's case is straightforward, Bebe's case is almost impossible to believe when you hear it said out loud. Ferguson later admitted that Bebe was the only player across his entire 26-year career that he signed without personally watching him play. One player. In over 100 signings, Bebe was the single exception to Ferguson's own meticulous process. He trusted a recommendation from his former assistant Carlos Queiroz and bypassed the standard scouting procedure entirely. The consequences were immediate and brutal. When Bebe arrived at the Carrington training ground, the technical staff assessed him quickly. Their conclusion was that he was technically and tactically weak. His positional intelligence was poor, his technical discipline was not at the required level. He could not integrate into a side that relied on high-speed transitions, quick decision-making, and precise positional understanding. He did not come close to meeting the minimum requirement. Loans followed almost immediately. Exits followed the loans. BB never had a meaningful Manchester United career in any real sense. He passed through the club like a ghost, leaving almost no trace behind. The lesson here is stark. Ferguson's entire system rested on meticulous attention to process. Every detail mattered. Every step of the scouting chain existed for a reason. BB was the one time Ferguson skipped a step, and it produced exactly the result that process is designed to prevent. A rare breakdown in a career defined by rigour. The result made clear why that rigour was never meant to have exceptions. Number 6. Owen Hargreaves. Few signings in Ferguson's long career arrived with as much genuine excitement as Owen Hargreaves. In 2007, he came from Bayern Munich for £17 million. He had been one of England's standout performers at the 2006 World Cup. He was supposed to fill the gap left by Roy Keane, a dynamic, intelligent box-to-box midfielder with the tactical discipline and stamina to control the tempo of big games. Ferguson later described Hargreaves as his most disappointing signing, and he was clear that the disappointment was not simply about injuries. Yes, Hargreaves suffered badly, tendinitis, chronic physical problems that kept him off the pitch for long stretches. Over 4 seasons, he made only 39 appearances for a club that had paid £17 million for him. But what truly frustrated Ferguson ran deeper than the injury record. He observed that Hargreaves had no real confidence in himself. He noticed the player consistently choosing the easier option in training, prioritising his own physical comfort over the grueling rehabilitation sessions required to push back to elite fitness. Ferguson saw it as a form of psychological surrender. A player who had the tools to fight back chose not to fight as hard as the situation demanded. For Ferguson, grit was not a personality trait that some people happen to have. It was a professional obligation. The determination to overcome physical setbacks was part of the job description at Manchester United. Hargreaves had the talent, he had the technical ability, he simply did not have the mental engine to force himself through the hardest part of recovery. And for the man who built his dynasty on exactly that kind of mental drive, that was unacceptable. Number 7. Massimo Taibi. We finish with the goalkeeper, the 4 games, with the one moment that decided everything. When Peter Schmeichel left in 1999, he left behind an almost impossible void. The position of goalkeeper at Manchester United, at a club that had just won the treble, carrying the weight of that history and expectation, is one of the most psychologically demanding roles in world football. Ferguson needed someone who could handle all of that and still perform at the highest level every single week. He signed Massimo Taibi for £4.5 million. Taibi lasted 4 games. The moment that ended his United career did not come from a blistering long-range shot or a devastating header. It came from a weak, rolling effort from Southampton's Matt Le Tissier, a shot that slipped between Taibi's legs and into the net. The British press labelled him the blind Venetian. It was brutal, it was unrelenting, and it was the moment Ferguson made his decision. His conclusion was clinical. Taibi did not have the mental strength required for the Premier League. Ferguson had seen blunders before and had seen players recover. When David De Gea made costly errors in his early United career, Ferguson did not cut him loose. He saw something in De Gea, a mental ceiling, a deep resilience that could be developed under pressure. He believed De Gea could metabolize failure and rebuild. With Taibi, he saw the opposite. He saw a goalkeeper who had already been psychologically broken by the moment. The belief was gone, the confidence had collapsed, and a goalkeeper without belief is not a goalkeeper at all. Ferguson made the assessment and he moved on. Taibi was sold within 6 months, and his name became, in football folklore, a shorthand for a very particular kind of public undoing. And that is the full picture. 7 players, 7 very different stories, but one single thread running through every single one of them. They all, in their own way, fell below the line that Ferguson spent 26 years drawing at Manchester United. Ferguson at 84 is still thinking about that line. He is still working to keep his own mind sharp. He solves crosswords. He attends matches and advises managers because his appetite for the game has never dimmed. His own brother's battle with dementia has made him more aware than ever of how precious the mental engine really is, and how quickly it can be lost if it is not pushed and protected. His warning that United may need another 10 or 11 years to return to the pinnacle of English football is not despair, it is honesty from a man who knows exactly what it takes. The collapse that followed his retirement is, in his view, a direct result of forgetting the things that made the club great. The character, the toughness, the refusal to accept anything less than full commitment from every single player every day. IEB crumbled under pressure. Hargreaves yielded to fragility. Bebe was the product of one skipped step. Bellion had speed, but nothing else. Kleberson had a World Cup medal, but not the toughness to survive an English winter. Heinze had everything, and threw it away for the wrong postcode. And Rooney, the greatest scorer in the club's history, let the fire burn down too early. The standard they failed is still the standard. It always will be. The road back for Manchester United runs directly through the same qualities Ferguson demanded in that dressing room for nearly 3 decades. Toughness, mental resilience, loyalty, a hunger that does not fade when the cameras are off and the training is at its hardest. That standard can be rebuilt. It has been built before. Ferguson proved it across a generation of players, decisions, and titles. The blueprint is not lost. It is written in everything this man achieved and everything he refused to accept. The shirt deserves players who understand what it means. Players who never choose the easy option. Players who, when the moment comes, never let the ball slip through their legs. That has always been the standard, and one day, someone at Old Trafford will remember exactly what that standard looks like.